Hi, were you just surfing around the internet looking for something interesting to watch? I'm sorry, you got us, the nonprofits. But we do have a really funny article we want to discuss today. And the great Eli Slack is going to lead us into it. So tell us, Eli, what you got for us?
Well, this article is less of an article and more of like a PowerPoint presentation of 10 things the author just doesn't understand. James Dorman makes several obviously false claims throughout his, little book report here, such as sentimentality is far better explained by spirituality and that science can't explain why humans share moral values. And I could go on, but it would take more time to explain all of the bad ideas that he has than it takes to tear each of them apart. This story is from Savvy Dime by James Dorman on August 19th, 2024.
Pretty much sums some of it all up there. There are like 10 segments here. What was the name of the article again? I got to remember. It's 10 mysteries 10 things scientists can't explain and attribute to God. And I thought, that's a really misleading title in and of itself, because I did not see any one scientist mentioned throughout this article attributing any of this bullshit to God. So, John, what did you think? What was your interpretation of this craziness?
It was pretty stupid, actually. I mean, I'm kind of a little bit of a science nerd, but this was pretty hilarious. I recommend it for a late night. I need a laugh. The day was really hard kind of reading, either that or, you can watch Saturday Night Live or something. But I just think that it's really hilarious. And I'm going to go through just the first few of them here and see if I will attempt to be regimented and reserved in my treatment of this statement. So let's see how it goes. I'm not hopeful. The origin of the universe. Science can't explain the origin of the universe. We know pretty much all we can ever know about up to a Planck time or two after the inflation started, which means that it was before there was pretty much time. So since you can't test, examine, or even really prove anything that is outside of time and space-time, there's nothing to prove. It's a ridiculous proposition. And so it's not that we don't know what happened before, because we can't, but we do know what happened all the way to a couple billionths of a second afterwards. So, and how it evolved from that. So I'm just saying that's, I suggest explanations I'm not a cosmologist, so I suggest that you read explanations by cosmologists or Sean Carroll, or not the biologist Sean Carroll, but Sean Carroll, the physicist. Stephen Hawking actually has a couple of books out that aren't bad. Carl Sagan, perhaps, Neil deGrasse Tyson. There are a lot of people who are really good at this. However, you can also watch podcasts that will teach you an awful lot about it. So I can recommend some. If you want to email me, I'll send you my favorite list. So anybody else have comments on this one?
I thought it was, they don't ever actually talk about any of the science in it, like, science can't explain the origin of the universe. And yet we have like 20 different explanations for it. And their explanation, God did it. I mean, go ahead and prove that one, because we can't prove Planck time, say, but they're in this, well, God did it. So, well, prove that to me, right? It always seems like these people are in the same place we are, but they just don't even realize it. So anybody else got anything they want to talk about that?
One thing that I wanted to point out is one of the ones that they pointed out was the meaning of life, how science can't explain that. And I thought, and the truth is that when it comes down to it, I love that question, because it gives me an opportunity to remind people that, yes, okay, so you have a definition that you think you got from a book that God told you of what life means, and you're trying to muddle through this, and you think that these pre-applied values mean something. Well, for me, getting out of religion and recognizing that it wasn't true allowed me to throw away that really terrible manual that's beaten into you potentially as a child, and to be able to apply your own values. values. And so rather than this is a negative, yes, it's great. I don't have to listen to what some book says everything should be, because I can apply those myself to the life around me. So when I look at this, I'm like, yeah, what you're talking about is a win. No, I don't have a universal price code that everything applies to everyone, but that's a freedom. That's not being bondage. Being bondage is being tied into a book that tells you what you have to think. And one other one I found very interesting is the human connection one. They talked about it, and what they're talking about very poorly is essentially empathy and altruistic behavior. We see this type of behavior in many animals. Rats, we even have rats demonstrating putting themselves at risk to help other rats in danger. So this is not something exclusive, and this is not something just exclusive to primates. This is something we find throughout the animal kingdom. So to treat this as if this is a human connection, no, this is a social connection that they're talking about.
Yeah, but you can't prove why people are nice, man. I'm sorry. It must be God.
And the scary part is
biological. It is. We've got actual tons of biological evidence about why that developed, and but it's way too long and involved a discussion to get into in this show at the moment.
Yeah, I think I'd rather talk about how this article is representing science rather than try to refute some of the idiocy within it. And like half of the subjects that they touch on that science can't answer are philosophical ones. They're not anything science could even do experiments on, like the meaning of life. Miracles was one of them. Well, first you got to prove miracles actually happen before we can start deciding whether they're real or not, because we haven't proved the miracle yet. So, I mean, it was just like this whole list of things that it was obviously a slanted article from the beginning. And I thought that what it was doing badly was representing science in a very, very bad light. What do you think about that, Eli?
Well, I was about to give him some credit, because he does say, and this is the slide called When Science Meets Faith. He does say, science is fundamentally the pursuit of answers. Just because science cannot explain something yet, and this is where he starts to go off the rails, that doesn't mean that scientists relent and accept something as inexplicable. Now, that is true, but he goes on to say,
the next sentence.
By the same token, the fact that science cannot explain something can be taken as proof that the explanation lies beyond the realm of science and exists in the spiritual, and that is bullshit. Because,
total bullshit.
Because that's not proof of anything other than we don't have the answer yet. Not having the answer is proof that we don't have the answer, and that's it. And it's really just evidence that we don't have the answer. It's not even proof if you want to get technical about it.
Let me give an example of that. Right in 1746, you couldn't say there had to be a God because we hadn't invented light yet.
Right.
Man-made light, and that's exactly what this is saying. Right? Science hasn't done something yet, so obviously God.
So that's proof that it can't, right, is what he says. And so the other one, and as you mentioned, a lot of these are philosophical questions, not scientific ones. And we did talk about like human connection and apathy, and one of them was morality. And that's really not even all that long of an explanation to get into. We learned that if we cooperate with other people, we have a better chance of surviving. And if we act like a dick, people don't want to cooperate with us, and we don't have as good a chance of surviving. That's what social animals are. And we don't just see morality in humans, and like you said earlier, Infidel, and not just in rats. Ants that get infected with like a disease or a poison or something that will spread to the rest of the colonies, they will volunteer themselves for euthanasia so they don't infect the rest of the colony. That's moral behavior in insects. Or I don't know, do ants count as insects? I'm pretty sure. But
yes,
yeah,
they do.
Some bugs surprise me sometimes. But the point being, there are perfectly logical scientific explanations for it, as we've already established, and they really don't take very much time at all for like anybody who starts to learn about these things. These are some of the first things you learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it kind of surprised me when I started looking at all of the 10 things, right? And one of them was the teleological argument. Everything fits perfect. We have this perfectly designed world. Science can't explain that. It was just,
we can.
yeah, I mean, well, yeah, we can
It's
prove it
a-
by, showing it's not a perfectly designed world. If it was, then the pit of the avocado wouldn't be so big, right?
Mhm.
Right.
But I have another argument for that, which I like to tell people about the Goldilocks universe. It's a form of the watchmaker argument, but it's a little different. The rub is that the chances of all that coming together has a probability of 1. In other words, it's a certainty. After all, it happened. We know that, right? Therefore, it's not improbable at all because it actually happened. That means it's not only probable, it happened. So any combination of those forces maybe could have had intelligent life appear, as the rules would be different. And we don't understand how they would be different. It's very complex. But we only have one example. So we have one sample, our universe, right? And that tells us nothing about what it would be like to have any one of the 4 major forces. Well, actually, I call them 3 forces, and a gravity isn't a force. So anyway, but yeah. So anyway, that's it. I just, it's just the probability is 1. Get over it. You're in the one universe if you want to think about it that way.
I would say that it's not quite 1, but because as you said, we only have one example. We don't know how many times a universe has attempted to or successfully begun or ended existing. So we would need to know the full amount to know what sample size we have. The point of the matter is that it doesn't matter because it did happen, just like you said. So if it happened any other way, we don't know whether that life couldn't have existed in any other instantiation of the universe, or that it could have. And we may never have answers like that because that may not even make sense. We don't really know that.
I don't think the question makes sense, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. We aren't even at the point where we know if that question does make sense. So the probability of the universe happening is kind of a moot point to even, I think, discuss, because here it is. Let's just talk about how it did.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. I could see infidel down there chomping, wanting to talk about another one of these 10 things. What do you got, Boris?
Well, actually, I wanted to build a little bit on that odds. We talk about what are the odds of something happening, because oftentimes we'll hear that when Christians are talking about something that has to be a miracle, because what are the odds of this happening? And I was reminded of a book that I read as a teenager, and I picked it up almost offhandedly, and it was about 9 people who survived Hiroshima and then Nagasaki. These people survived the nuclear bomb, atomic bomb, went to Nagasaki, and then survived another one. Now, your odds are pretty bad all about, and I went to started to break down how would you even break down those odds. You have logistics, are you well enough to make the trip, all these other things, because you're surviving in a atomic situation that nobody knows what's going on. And when you start thinking about things like this, the odds are pretty long. But once again, just like our universe, it did happen. And so 1 in a million things, 1 in 10 million things happen every day. So just because something's a long shot, to give it a veneer of a miracle is just so odd to me, because also you mentioned the Goldilocks universe. I'm sure that more than a few of us are familiar with Douglas Adams with the puddle, and everything just seems so finely, this hole is just perfectly tuned for me this to exist inside this puddle, and it completely ignores that everything around it is bred for this world. So yes, they tried to tie in God to pretty much everything on here, and the truth is the way they did it was saying, oh, science doesn't have an exclamation, so therefore God did it.
Straw manning. Straw manning science. And besides, science is not a thing, so you can't talk about it like it's a thing. It's a method. So they need to educate themselves a little bit too.
It's also the body of work that's been discovered through that method too. So it's not just the method, but it's also what we've been able to discover from that method. So I think that's important to remember.
But to add to your point, infidel, kind of like you said, 1 in a million things happen so often. And Kelly, this was something that you and I talked about during the back cruise. If a thing happens to you once every second, 1 million seconds is like 11 and a half days.
34.
So I just did the math. I just looked it up.
No, actually it was what it was 34 days if you're awake and alert for 8 hours a day.
Okay, yeah. So if you're awake for being awake for 1 million seconds is being awake is 34 days worth of time. 1 in a million thing happens every 34 days.
Yeah.
So that it's I have people will bring in perfectly round balls into rocks into my store all the time, and they think they found a cannonball, and I have to explain to them that we don't never have rocks been used as cannonballs in North America ever, and they always want to know how it got so perfectly round. And that's what I always say, well, what do you think the chances of that happening? 1 in a million? Yeah, probably about that. Okay, now think of how many rocks are in a 20-mile radius of the store. Probably 10 million. There's still 9 more out there. Go look for it.
I like that.
Gather them all up and make a wish.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be something.
So again, like one of the things that really bothered me was the choice of topics that this person decided science couldn't explain, because he picked so many topics that, there's no way science can explain them because they aren't topics of anything physical. It was mostly, like I said, philosophical things that we've been arguing about for millennia and still haven't found the answer to. So
and they strawmanned a lot, and they even made a lot of errors in this. Just the whole idea that because science states that everything in existence must be conserved, so our souls. Did you see that one? Life after death.
Life after
death. Science doesn't say that at all. Nowhere does science.
I think
say
they were
that.
talking about energy. You
can't destroy energy or information.
I do hear that from T.S. a lot. That your soul has to go somewhere because the energy can't be destroyed. And I was like, no, but there are batteries, and the Earth is a battery, big battery too. So when you die, the energy that once was used to move your body around is now dissipated through the soil, where it's picked up by the plants for more energy. See, our energy isn't destroyed; it just moves on, and people don't click like that.
You can transform energy into other things, and matter itself is just a different form of energy.
And it doesn't have to go somewhere right away. Like I said, like the Earth is a giant battery. Our energy is stored within the Earth until the plants need it, and then stored within the plants until the animals that eat the plants need it, and then stored in those animals until maybe one of us eats them. So
Well, I've got to say that I found the article quite interesting in the fact that they were able to write so much and say so little. Because at the end of the day, they made all these claims and all these grandiose gestures, but truthfully, at the end of the day, it was like, I don't understand something, so God did it. And that really boiled down to, because as Kelly said, a lot of these issues aren't things that there's a way for them to be addressed through science. Science has no methodology to address some of these because they're, frankly, just pretty much pulled out of somebody's ass. So when you have something like that, science can't answer it. Science can't answer a lot of things because you're not asking a question that science is designed to answer. And the truth is science is more about, as Kelly, you mentioned, the gathering of knowledge and that process in which knowledge is gathered. But it's not about making true claims. I don't think science is ever going to say the absolute way that this is and throw something out there, because if science makes a claim, it's going to have to be pretty certain of it. That's why we call it the theory of gravity. We don't call it the rule, but let's go and see on the top of a building and let's see how consistent this is. And that's pretty much what they're doing here. Just smoke and ashes, just trying to distract. It's smoke and mirrors.
I would say add one thing though. A few of these questions can be answered by science. It's just not the typical 3 sciences. There are a couple of these questions that can be answered by sociology, maybe 3 or 4. And there's psychology answers to a lot of these sorts of, questions, like why, and also why you ask these questions. So, sociology, anthropology can also explain how we get to that position to where we need to know what is consciousness. Well, there's a lot of ways to approach that. Consciousness is a emergent property of very complex organic systems at the moment. Eventually, we'll see if we can make a machine. Yeah. But that's all that is. And any organism with a sufficiently complex brain is going to have a consciousness. So we know that. We can show that in the history and development of intelligence throughout the human species as well as great apes, and then going to other species as well. Pigs are known to be extremely intelligent. They're more intelligent than dogs. Dogs are way more intelligent than a lot of other animals. So all these things, consciousness, intelligence, they've all been pretty much sussed out for the basics. So read a book, take a class,
I wonder if this is one of those things where, like, how if you want to get the right answer to something, all you got to do is post the wrong answer online and somebody will correct you faster than if you ask the question. But what drives algorithms and gets views is comments. So what this guy is doing is like, I'm going to say a bunch of wrong shit all at once and I'm going to get so many fucking comments, man.
Good point.
Maybe that's what this is.
It could be. We just had the back cruise. All four of us were at the ACA back cruise. It's an annual event. We had a lot of fun. And the ACA does a lot of other cool events besides the back cruise. And you can find out what some of those events are by going to atheist-community.org. Visit the website, see what's there. And if you want to see more of the nonprofits, you can find us right here.